Hey guys, welcome back. Now, what I have in my hand here is the Realme 6 Pro, and I have to say this is probably the most exciting phone of 2020. Now, before we talk more about the phone, let's talk about the unboxing experience. So, the unboxing is pretty straightforward. You get the phone, obviously. It also comes with a silicone case, which is pretty cool. It comes with your USB cable, Type-C cable. So that's great as well. And you get a 30-watt fast charger. So that's really, really nice as well. But yeah, so unboxing really simple. Moving on to the phone. All right, so let's talk about the specs. So this comes with a Qualcomm Snapdragon 720G. With the G, I believe, is emphasized for gaming. It comes with 8GB of RAM and 120GB of storage. Yeah, well, let's first talk about the screen. I think for me, the screen is probably the most exciting part of the phone. Not because of the panel or not because that it's IPS LCD. You got OLED and AMOLED screens. Now that obviously gives you better color and contrast ratios. But this is probably the first phone or budget phone with a 90Hz display. Now, the reason why this is so exciting is because honestly, like if you have a laptop or if you have a computer and you've recently moved from a mechanical hard disk to an SSD, the change is automatic. Straight away, you see a vast improvement in your computer. It's a lot faster just with that one thing. Your CPU and RAM all hasn't been changed, right? So with a 90Hz display, you sort of get the same experience where you can't really go back. Like having a 90Hz display is extremely smooth, and this is not a flagship phone, right? This is a budget phone, probably budget to mid-range, but we'll talk about the price later. But I believe this is probably the cheapest phone that you can get with a display that's higher than your usual 60Hz. But yeah, I mean, the previous phones that I've owned have all been on 60Hz screen. And of course, I reviewed other phones with a really nice refresh rate as well. They got like the Asus ROG phone. And then of course now you've got the S20, you've got the OnePlus, and all those gaming phones that all have a very high refresh rate. But they all have one similarity. They all really cost a bomb. Usually at least 1,600 Singapore dollars. But this is not anywhere close to that price, and you still get a 90Hz, which is still fantastic. And honestly, I kind of feel like I really can't go back. Like when I switch back to my own phone and I just browse or play games, the difference is just so vast that I feel like I can't go back to a 60Hz screen anymore. Now, like I said, it is not an AMOLED or OLED screen. It's got an IPS LCD screen, and of course, you can't really compete with an OLED or AMOLED screen. You just can't compete with the colors. You can't compete with the contrast ratio. So things like content consuming, like watching shows and all that, you can kind of tell the difference. And especially like my current phone, the LG V30, has an OLED screen or a P-OLED screen, and definitely the colors are quite a fair bit better. Having said that, IPS LCD screens have come a really long way, and I have to say that this is probably among the best LCD screens out there on any mobile phone. Okay, right, like watching shows, playing games, it feels really good. And if you don't have a phone with an OLED screen side by side, and you just had this and you watch, I'm very sure you will be perfectly satisfied, even happy with the quality of the content that you're watching on this phone. And of course, we got to talk about the camera, all right? So this has a quad camera setup, which is kind of common with a lot of phones in this range. But basically, you get a 64 megapixel main lens. You get a 12 megapixel telephoto lens, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and a 2 megapixel macro lens. Now, I want to talk about taking photos on this phone or phones in general. Now, is it going to compare with the top flagship phones? Of course not. But having said that, if you didn't have these photos side by side to compare taking the same photo, honestly, the photo that I've taken with this phone, I have really enjoyed. There are a few caveats and I'll speak about that later. But generally, all the photos that I've been taking, I have been very impressed. Even my wife, who has an iPhone, and Of course, with this pandemic, we are all staying at home, and then we've decided to cook as much as possible, just to try out different recipes. And whatever we cook, we try to take photos. Now, of course, it just doesn't take good photos of food. Walking around, taking photos. When I go to the supermarket, the photos are definitely acceptable, and I would say beyond acceptable. I mean, it's not one of the best that you're going to get out there on mobile phones, definitely, but I think for what you're getting with this phone, I would say it really, really is very good. Now, another thing that I really like about this phone, it is actually the back of the phone. Now, I have to say, this is probably the best looking back of any phone I have ever seen. And I'm not just talking about phones like budget phones or phones in this price range. No, I'm talking about the best looking back of any phone that I have ever seen in my life. It is beautiful to the point that I don't want to really put a casing on it. But I mean, like I said, Realme does provide a casing, but it's not entirely transparent. It's got a slight tint to it, which kinds of blocks the beauty of it, but you can still see through. But when I first took it out of the box, I looked at it, I was amazed. And of course, I'm sure this is going to be a personal preference. Some of you might not enjoy. And by the way, this also comes in what they call lightning blue. This is lightning red, I think. But the blend from the black to the red, and this sort of like a lightning thing, when I move the phone around, you can probably see it. It is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen on any phone. Okay, so let's talk about the performance of this phone when gaming. Now, like I said, when I use this phone, I play my usual games like Mobile Legends and even Pokemon Go. Now, same thing here, because of this 90Hz display, every game that I've tried has looked far better than my LG phone. And really, the 90Hz does so much more for a game in some ways than even a faster processor. And by the way, this comes with a really good, a big battery, 4300 milliamps, which is not the biggest, but when you team it up with a Snapdragon Qualcomm 720G, which is an 8nm chip. And I'm not going to go too much into why that's better for battery life, but basically, this processor, which is on the 8nm, is a lot more efficient. And then you couple it with a big battery, and it has excellent battery life. Even playing like on a day where I really tried to put it to the test, and I kept playing games and I kept doing video recording, it still lasted me a whole day. And when it was like very close to the kind of usage that I do with my phones, I got like a day and a half. And like from the morning, if I were to charge the phone at full in the morning, it would last me the next day evening. That's how good the battery is, and I have been absolutely impressed. Now, there are some bells and whistles that are missing compared to some of the flagship phones. You don't get in-screen fingerprint sensor. It's a side fingerprint sensor, which I'm not a fan of, but on this phone, it is actually quite quick. You don't get wireless charging, but for me personally, I never use wireless charging, even on my current phone that does support it. Now, this is usually the part of the video where I talk about the things that I don't like on the phone, and honestly, it is an extremely short list. There's only a couple of things, and both of them are kind of related to the same issue. Now, one is, like I said, I was very impressed with the photos. However, there were certain instances where I would take a photo, and I'll take it a few times, or I would just move a bit, and suddenly the phone, like the picture would be extremely overexposed. It would be so white, like as if like I saw an angel or something. And I don't know why it did that. It happened a couple of times with me and with my wife as well. The good news is I am almost certain that this is more computational photography than a hardware issue with the lens. And that's good news, because that means that Realme can actually work on it and do a fix, and I'm pretty sure they will. Now, they also have a Realme 6, okay, which is about $100 less, so that's about $399. And of course, there are some things that are different. You get a different camera module. You get a slightly smaller screen. I think that's like 6.5 inches when this is 6.6. And then like the chip is different as well. It's a MediaTek chip compared to this. However, that MediaTek chip is on a 12nm process. This is 8nm. So this would definitely be a bit more efficient. And they both have the same battery. A lot of other things are pretty similar. Now, unfortunately, Realme wasn't able to send that phone to me, so I couldn't do a comparison between the two. However, on paper and what I've seen in terms of the stats, I would recommend this one purely on what I see on paper. Obviously, like I said, I don't have the phone to test it out. But the fact that you get a better processor, a more efficient processor, a better camera module, and which also leads to better battery life and overall a better experience, I would still recommend this. I think that's worth the extra $100. But unless Realme decides to send me the Realme 6, I can't really say that for sure. So how will I rate this phone? Now, I've had this phone for a couple of weeks now, and the fact that this phone costs 499 Singapore dollars, I felt like I've been using a flagship phone. It has been that smooth for me. I've enjoyed it that much. Of course, like I mentioned, there is that exposure issue with the photos and the slight stuttering. Not common, but every now and then I might get that. But I'm sure Realme can push in some fixes to help optimize the operating system. But apart from those two things, everything has been an enjoyable experience. I've really enjoyed it. So I am giving this a very easy 5 out of 5 and Tech the Rebel recommended logo. Alright, so this wraps up my review of the Realme 6 Pro. Now if you enjoyed this video, you know what to do, and I would love it if you would subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to receive notifications on our next video. I'm JP, and I'll see you real soon.